Welcome to my channel. Today with Create with Katie, we are going to be working with a napkin focal point. I'm going to be working on an 8x10 canvas board, but this could be done in an art journal page as well. This napkin is called Poppy Scene, and it is one of my favorite poppy napkins from NinnysNapkins. There's other ones. Now what I've done is I've rough cut it to kind of figure out what I wanted to do with the composition of my project. And I've removed the plies now, and I am using a liner brush and water cutting the excess napkin out. I'm doing this because I just like the deckled edge. Now I'm going to place this a little bit above. I will be adding the stem, so this isn't going to be floating in the air, but I like this angle. Now poppies are a symbol of Remembrance Day, and as we are moving into November, I printed out the poem in Flanders Fields in a nice bold script font onto copy paper. I've ripped it apart into segments, and then I am going to collage that into the background. My plan is that some of this will peek through, but you won't necessarily see the entirety of the poem, but it is going to add an interesting element into the background. Well, that's my plan anyways. So once I've figured out exactly where I want it, and I'm kind of avoiding putting it right underneath the biggest part of the napkin because I don't want the script to distort the poppies, I'm just going to glue this down with fluid matte medium. And I'm putting some underneath and then a good coat of it on top, making sure that this is firmly down onto the background. Being on copy paper, it's also adding a slight bit of texture. And then of course I will give this a dry, and I apologize for the cord that's sitting there. I do fix this momentarily. So once that's dry, I did cut out a mask the shape of a poppy, and you can see that in the center of the page. And then I am pushing thickened gesso through this endless swirl stencil. This is a great way of getting subtle texture into the background. It's not going to be as texturized as if you use modeling paste, but it's going to be subtle. And I want subtle. Because I don't want the background to overtake the poppy focal point. And I'm just kind of putting this around the poppies, where I'm going to put the poppies. And there's the mask. Now I'm going to give that a good dry, and I'm going to take time to clean my stencil. Now I want to decide on colors, and I grab some papers from my stash, and I'm just putting the focal image on that. So I'm liking the yellow. It matches the yellow in the middle of the poppies. The red goes really well with that yellow. Ooh, I love this gel print with that little bit of red in it and that grunge. So I might go something along that line. I'm just testing out colors, testing out what I like, and this helps me decide how to colorize the background. Ooh, I also like that one. Very rustic or vintage looking. So I decided to go with Naples yellow, and I am mixing the Naples yellow with white gesso and putting it right onto the canvas board, which by the way has been a coat of gesso on it. And I'm mixing this up. I want different tones. I want some lighter areas, some more white gesso, and darker areas, more of the Naples yellow. I'm just building that up. This is just the base coat of color. I know I'm going to be tweaking it and adding interesting things. And then this is going to go here. Now I don't want that script to come through and distort my focal image. And so I am just knocking it back with a little bit more gesso. And that's what I'm doing right now. Giving it a dry and just making sure that I don't see that script. And as you can see, that script has been considerably knocked back. Now I'm adding a little bit more of the Naples yellow, and I'm just building up the color as I go. Now in that, because Naples yellow is more opaque, I end up pretty much getting rid of the script. So not much of it at all ends up showing. But that's okay, it's kind of like a hidden message. So once I'm happy with the base coat of color, I am going to glue my napkin down, putting matte medium underneath and then on top. Being careful not to rip the napkin. Now you'll notice in the center part it's much lighter because I had put a lot of white gesso there because I wanted to get rid of the script. Right now it's just too light. I'm not really liking that, so I'm going to adjust that. So here I just get some of that Naples yellow and I'm painting in where I think it is too light. But now it's going on just those places. I didn't want it too super dark, too much yellow underneath the poppy, because then that would change the color of the poppies. Does that make sense? So now I have my Inktense block and I've got a red that I've matched to the poppies, kind of a reddish orange, and I'm making a puddle of it and then putting it on the canvas and moving it around. It's getting caught in the thickened gesso, and I'm loving the colors that are showing up here. It's making it look like that poppy color is in the background. Now this is a very imprecise thing and it's a lot of playing. You're adding, you're taking off, you're adding more, you're taking off. I'm squirting it with water. I'm just playing. Now Inktense blocks, if you're not familiar, are ink. They are in a solid form. They become liquid when you add water, but when they're dry, they are permanent, unlike watercolor. So once this is dry, if I add another wet layer or I go to varnish this, it is not going to move. I'm loving the cloudy effect here, but I do play with it, and this is a technique that I love when other people do it, but it doesn't come easily for me because it's so unpredictable, and you just have to throw caution to the wind and play with it. Now you can do this with acrylic paint as well. You want to liquefy it, put it in, and have it move. But I do highly recommend that you use something that's permanent. It's just going to save you a lot of headaches later on. So now I am overpainting the daisies that are in there and adding that white. They stand out. Now they were white on the napkin and they became more yellow and faded into the background because of course the background was yellow. And so by overpainting, I am freshening it up and making that white, which is providing a contrast and really helps make this better. I do later on go and put a second coat on just to make them more opaque white. But I let this dry and then I come back. You can, judge. So I've added some Hooker's green with the Naples yellow, and here I'm painting the stems because I don't want the flowers just floating in the middle of the page. That looks funny. So here I've just added some stems, and then I'm over painting any of the greenery as well. If you've watched my other videos, you know this is one of my favorite techniques to overpaint napkins, printables. On this one, I'm painting some elements, but not all the elements. And I like that kind of two different effects. And because no one is going to see the napkin compared to this, if it's not exactly what was, it's okay. So I want to add another leaf, and I could have just free-handed it, but I'm going to show you another alternative. Here I'm taking gesso, and I found this dandelion stencil that has a leaf. Look through your stencils. I'm sure you can find something that has a leaf you can use as a base, and then I'm painting it out, and I'm looking at the one that's there. Alternatively, I could have cut another leaf from a different part of that napkin and glued that on, making my own composition. And so again, I'm using those same colors and just adding a leaf to fill in that space. And I'm using a liner brush for this. And there I'm adding a little bit more to the daisies, as I mentioned earlier on. I'm adding some yellow to the center of the poppies. I think I'm using yellow oxide here, which is a darker color than Naples yellow. Now with a little black on my angle brush, I am going to add some shading to the poppy. I'm just going to outline some of the leaves or the petals and separate them, add some shadows. And in doing so, make the focal point stand out against the background a little bit more. I'm not sure if it's on the video, but I do use some of my Inktense blocks and make water and give it a wash of maybe a little deeper color, just to turn up the color a bit. But I don't overpaint like I did with the daisies. And I'm shading the leaves as well. I want to add a little bit of grunge, a little bit of small scope. So I've grabbed this script stencil and I'm using a black acrylic paint and just adding some script to it. Remember the script that I had, the poem in Flanders Fields, kind of got hidden. And since that was gone, I wanted to add script back. And I'm edging the canvas board in my case. You can edge your art journal page. Now these canvas boards are perfect. You can pop them into a regular 8x10 frame or just have them on an easel. I put the mask back on and I'm splattering with white. I just didn't want to get the white on the poppies. And then I'm splattering with gold. And I didn't mind that being on the poppies because it's not going to be as noticeable. And this way it also differentiates the background and the focal image. I was saying about popping it into a regular frame, you want to take the glass off. I wanted to add a little bit dimension to the center of the poppy, so I grabbed the stencil butters, which are kind of pearlized. This is gamboge, I'm adding that one, and then I grabbed terracotta and add a little bit of highlights with that. And it's texturized. And there's the terracotta. I couldn't decide for the longest time whether I was going to put a sentiment or not. I decided to go with Love Wins, and I'm using my wooden blocks and white acrylic paint. And I chose white because I wanted a sentiment, but I didn't want it to overtake the focal image. I didn't want it to be as predominant. So I chose white. Would you have chosen black? Now, because I'm using acrylic paint, if I make a mess, I can erase, as you've seen me doing here, and restamp, because everything underneath is permanent. If it was watercolor or something that wasn't permanent, that would lift, and then you would have to redo parts of it. And you want to clean the stems. So thank you for joining me. I absolutely love how this turned out. More close-ups are following. If you give it a try, tag me so I can see your creations. Until next time, go get creative.